Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Friday, May 31st. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Trevor May, all here with you. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching us live on YouTube, shout out to the Live Hive. Get some questions in there. We'll have a lot of time for questions at the end of the show today. Be sure to smash the like button on this video, whether you're watching us live or not. A lot of ground to cover today. We're going to spend some time digging into what's going on with the Atlanta lineup. They lost Ronald Acuna Jr. over the long weekend. They've been in that position before. We talked about that earlier in the week, but this hasn't been the same Braves lineup top to bottom that we saw in 2023 when they had kind of an all-time great season, a 125 WRC plus, a 20.6% K rate. So we'll try to dig into why and come up with some answers as to what's been different with a lot of those key bats in the Atlanta lineup. We're also going to talk about the narrow opportunities some players have when they're basically fighting for their career, fighting for an opportunity to be an everyday player, maybe fighting for a chance to be a starter instead of a reliever. You dig into some of the guys that are in that situation right now and the added stress of that situation, which it's amazing that your whole career could be defined by something that happens in 4 weeks or 6 weeks because that was the only chance you got depending on a various set of circumstances. We're going to begin today, though, with some changes from the Mets. They've been in the news a lot this week. Christian Scott gets optioned to AAA along with Brett Baty. I think one of those options is a bit different than the other. One, I think, is a schedule-related situation with Christian Scott, where with some off days and a trip to London and a guy that they're trying to monitor workload-wise, they're just sending him down to have an extra reliever around, which, okay, is a hassle for fantasy managers, but somewhat makes sense in terms of just getting the long-term Christian Scott outcome where you want it. Getting his development rights more important than trying to max out every inning he gets in the big leagues at this moment. For Brett Baty,
Trevor, did you ever do a like one of those weird spots like one of like Mexico City or like where it's like even in spring where it's like you guys had to travel internationally for a game?
No, I the 1 year that I could have done that would have been 2017, but that's the year I got Tommy John. I think it was actually spring training of 2018. It was Puerto Rico when the Twins.
That seems like one of the easier ones too. It's a pretty quick flight, off the eastern seaboard.
Hurt, so I didn't get invited to that one.
I think I'd be annoyed as heck if I was a Met right now.
I wouldn't want to do it.
The mid-season trip definitely seems worse, even though as a pitcher getting ready a little earlier is also a hassle. It seems better to have travel like we saw for the Padres and Dodgers at the beginning of the season before opening day.
Oh, I don't know. That had its own things. The Padres camp was messed up. Like Musgrove probably hated the fact that they had to go there.
Yeah, but think about it. Like Trevor, is the rhythm of the season, is it harder to break out of it for something like that compared to doing it, getting it out of the way, and then getting back into the typical rhythm?
Yeah, in the middle of the season, it's brutal, frankly. Honestly, flying like from the East Coast to the West Coast was disruptive enough, like feeling like you're pitching at 1 a.m. You go out at 9:30 out into the mound, and it's actually 12:30 to your body. Like that's hard enough. Flipping it around and being like, I feel like it's the middle of the night or it's early in the morning to me, and I'm supposed to pitch and pitch well. And then you add in the fact that London specifically, I don't know if you guys remember last time with the London series, but a lot of fly balls went over the fence. It didn't look like very fun to pitch. And I think these things might adversely affect pitchers because I think pitchers are a little more one little thing gets out of whack and it can completely just throw you off the rail. Like you go from being really effective to not effective at all. So I think these abrupt things maybe have a greater impact on it. Maybe a starting pitcher, maybe. It's tough to get around, but I mean, it hurts everybody. I just think that hitters can like get the swings going a little bit, and it's less stuff you have to kick rust off for. So I wouldn't love it. I would love to get it out of the way. I'm not big on traveling anyways, but just adding a flight that's 10 hours longer than all the other flights. You got to really have a positive mindset. Just be excited to be in another country playing baseball, and you got to just treat it kind of like it's an exhibition game, even though it's during the season. I think that's the best way to feel.
To take some of the stress out of it. Yeah,
take some of the stress out of it because you're already there's enough stress in the body from the flight and everything.
Yeah, and the espresso machine will be in much use.
Yes.
I got to get a new espresso machine, but that is for another day. The Brett Baty option seems like a bigger long-term question, and he sort of fits into the broader conversation we're going to have a little bit later, where it's like this is a pivot point in his career. It's a fork in the road. It doesn't mean his career's over because he's young enough where he's going to get more chances somewhere. But each chance he gets after this might be different than the chances he's had up to this point, because if it's with a new organization, they didn't invest the same draft capital in him in the first place. They don't have the same expectations necessarily going in. And I think there's like added pressure each time. And New York's already a place where it seems like there's added pressure. At least that's been the narrative for a long time. Trevor maybe could speak to that. Like, did it feel different pitching in New York for half your games than other places you pitched throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny looking back, like just looking at stats and stuff. It seems like I really enjoyed pitching Citi Field. It's like my best stadium, which that probably surprises a lot of people. But I liked it, but it is a different beast. It's we're talking in reference to the Jorge Lopez, which I know we'll maybe probably touch on at some point. It's kind of hard to avoid that. But I was talking with someone about the peaks and valleys and kind of if you built a visual of a roller coaster for each team, in terms of like how their fans feel and then how their players feel. I'd say the Mets and probably the Phillies are the top two teams in how high those peaks can be and how low those valleys can be. So the sky's falling if things go poorly for 3 days in a row, but if they go well for 3 days in a row, you're the best team on the planet, right? So that's just the way it is. And if it lines up where your valley lines up perfectly with the team's valley, that can be overwhelming in a lot of ways. So yes, there is something to that.
You know what I'm hearing when you say that is that like the perfect manager for New York would be like a Bruce Bochy type that's like just chill all the time.
Bruce Bochy would be as a New York guy would be a really, really interesting situation.
They tended to have more like kind of like stressed out, a little bit more angry, managers, I feel like, and like
a little bit, but that bleeds in. Honestly, I think Buck Showalter was good enough because he just like he was kind of like had like rain. He just stuff beat it off of him, but that's the way he like learned to manage it.
Right. I think actually Buck fits the Bochy. He's kind of chill. He's chill in his own way.
He's more intense, but he doesn't take a lot of like the stuff that if you took it seriously could eat at you. He doesn't take that stuff seriously, and it's probably because he had managed in New York before and he learned that. So but yeah, Bochy like in New York is a very interesting thought. Like I just love, but then again, look at Rob Thompson, right? He's chill, and he handles Philly great. And no one's ever talking about that, right? He's doing it, but then again, they're 40 and 17, so pretty easy to be a big under manager when he's doing that well.
I think there was a great Hannah Kaiser tweet maybe a year or two ago just about the differences. Rob Thompson, this very calm, I think he's Canadian, managing the Phillies, and then this she referred to the Phillies manager as like a beat faced. Like the temperament of the market was so different compared to the manager. It just didn't align. John Schneider was this kind of
I think you almost want that.
Yeah, like you need the opposite. That seems to be the
Manuel was perfect.
Charlie Manuel,
seems to be the
World
way to
Series.
go.
Chilling.
But yeah, Baty's time at AAA could be a lot longer than Christian Scott's. I think Christian Scott's back probably 2-3 weeks from now and starting kind of regularly until he hits his innings limit at some point at the later part of the season. Tough for fantasy purposes, though. You're going to hold him for a couple of weeks given the lack of pitching available.
Baty or Scott?
Scott.
I'm going to hold Scott because I think this could be a situation where he would cost a lot to get back, and he profiles to me as an above average pitcher who has a great home park, and so I'm going to hold on to Scott. Baty, I don't think I can hold on to him except in keeper leagues, but in keeper leagues there's he has top third raw power in terms of his max EV, so like in terms of bat speed, it's there. It's the swing shape that's the problem. He's beating the ball into the ground. And, this is a weird name to bring up because we're struggling right now. But Randy Arozarena profiles very similarly in terms of hits the ball super hard, hits the ball on the ground a little bit more than you'd expect. But Randy Arozarena has had really great, production in the past. And I think he'll figure it out again this year. And so I wonder if Baty has never been given a full season. Like, what if the A's get him eventually and are just like, we're just going to put you in the lineup every day, or, some rebuilding squad. It's like, we get you, put you in the lineup every day, and we're not going to stress you out about all this stuff and just hit the ball hard. Why couldn't he hit like 15 to 18 to 20 homers and then do well on balls in play? Because he's hitting the ball hard. And maybe he hits too many ground balls, and maybe he never hits 35 homers, but otherwise he's a decent third baseman who hits, 18 homers and hits 280 and gets on base. I don't know, like that's all like a possible. The fork in the road for me is, does he chase the 30 home run power and try to lift the ball and change his swing and do all that, or does he embrace who he is? And sometimes I feel like we focus and teams focus on what you're doing wrong and not on what you could do right. And so on some level, I would just, give him the bat, give him a job, and say, hey, like, yes, you hit the ball on the ground, just hit it hard.
I do think if you look at his results in the minors compared to what's happened through basically a season split over parts of 3 years in the big leagues, mostly 23 and 24, you see two completely different players. But I think that says more about the difference in the quality of the pitching between big leagues and the minors right now. I don't
could
think
have a hole that they're just exploiting at the major leagues that he can't cover.
Yeah, I mean, we saw some growth in terms of the K rate coming down, the walk rate going up this year. There were a few positives. Mets fans really don't want to hear it, but the quality of the contact was there at the brief time he's been at AAA last year. He had a 57.9% hard hit rate. That is a ton of hard contact. I think he should continue to try to hit for power. I think it's absolutely the better version of Brett Baty. If that doesn't work over another 600 plate appearances, then maybe you start making some sort of adjustment. But I really liked him going into the season. He's been a player I've been wrong about so far, and very curious to see where things go from here for him. Maybe a guy that could be on the move at the trade deadline. It kind of feels like everything's on the table for the Mets 2 months from now. Clearly a team trending towards being sellers, but is it selling some of the players that we thought would be there for a long time, or is it just moving some of the guys that are there on shorter term deals, or some of the veterans that are nearing the end of their
Baty
contract?
Go with McNeil and somebody else to help him clean up some cash?
So, yeah, right. To move money, that could be part of the plan for David Stearns and company. To be a fun couple of months from the outside looking in at the Mets. Probably not a fun time to be a Met. That would be
or a Mets fan.
Easy pass for me. Let's talk about a team also in the NL East, a little more fun to be on board with right now. That would be Atlanta. We started wondering this week, what's happening in Atlanta's lineup? They just haven't hit the same stride that they did last year. Now, one of our listeners, John, sent some ideas, a theory in our Discord, watches every Braves game. He said one theory is that MLB will release new balls starting tomorrow for June 1st. The June 1st balls will hit, and the Braves will take off. But looking back at 2022, that's exactly what happened then. Through May 31st, they were 23 and 27, averaging 4.1 runs per game. From June 1st on, they went 78 and 34 and averaged 5.1 runs per game, which is an amazing flip of the switch. And then he pointed to some X stats and other things that still are really favorable. Some of the numbers under the hood looking really good. And the other thing that John pointed out, a lot of cold weather games, which is true for many teams. It's been kind of a cold spring around the country. That's been one of the explanations people have floated for power just being down around the league. And I'm willing to buy into some of that. So how much do you think it's something else? And how much of it do you think is, stuff that John's kind of pointing at here? I mean, what do you think about this lineup, Trevor? They're still good. They still have a 108 WRC plus. They look a lot like they did in 2022. And that's even with guys that haven't played anywhere near their projection and expectation.
First of all, thank you for the PTSD on the 78 and 34 to end the year in 2022. I think they got lost in translation that, I don't know, they're the greatest team in history over, 112 games, and they chased us, the Mets, and everyone's like, why can't you hold them off? Because they're the best team ever. Maybe that's why. So thank you for that. I love also the conversation around how hitting is down in May every single year. And we do this every single time. And then in June, it picks up because it's 75 degrees everywhere and everyone starts hitting. The fact that maybe new balls are being put in play, those are just an old badge. That's what Rob said. So that's what I'm going with. They're always old badges. Never been any new balls. It's just a coincidence. Okay. I mean, who knows? I'll always make that joke. I'll just assume they're just manipulating balls, but it doesn't matter. I think they're fine. I think that this is the biggest lack of production has just been because Austin Riley hasn't quite gotten going yet, and he's figuring out. He's had some injuries, maybe some nagging stuff the whole time, and maybe he's finally going to start getting healthy and looking like old Austin Riley. And Olson, like those were the boppers. Those were the guys who were like producing like crazy, and they're not quite doing it this year. And that's almost just that on its face is almost enough to point out that change in those statistics with the runs created plus and just the overall production. But it's still peripherally close. It's still within like the margin of error almost. Like it's in that range. There's still that type of team. But I went and looked. I mean, Ozzy Albies isn't handling heaters up late. He doesn't really usually do it, but he hasn't gotten any. He hasn't hit anything really hard, at least against guys who throw fastballs late, like ride guys like me, which is 80% of the league, right? And then you add in that Harris hasn't either. So those two guys have been needed to produce a little bit more, especially with the struggles of Acuna Jr. Now he's out and he wasn't handling heaters up as well as he has in the past either.
Been out the whole time, so
yeah, maybe the knee was bothering him the whole time. So like they just have had like three major guys who were basically the engine that powered that crazy offense last year, all either deal with injuries, go out for the year, or just scuffle a little bit. So they're one or two of those guys picking it back up, getting back to, and
yeah,
it was also a historical offensive year. Like it's hard to compare to that.
Just natural regression is going to occur when you're that good. It's hard to maintain it.
That's true too. Yeah, just this normal regression. But Steven is right too when he points out the worst May slugging over the last 10 Mays. So there's a little piece in Ken Rosenthal's article today that I did some research for and helped him look at what the league is looking at, what we are looking at to see if there's something fundamentally different. And yes, it was a cold April. It was colder than last year. So that was part of the picture for sure. But this May has been warmer than last year's May, and the numbers are still down. So one thing I tried to do was look at pulled barrels. So if you're talking about pulled barrels, you're correcting for batted ball spray. So you're looking just at the best kind of barrels pulled. You're not looking at maybe by accident a bunch of oppo barrels. You're looking at pulled barrels. And I looked at Aprils and Mays. So it should to some degree be correcting for temperature. It's not on every single ball, but it's kind of looking at the same time of frame. And I looked at pulled barrels over the StatCast era, and it's down. They're down 3 feet in distance this year. And it's the lowest it's been in the StatCast era. So there is some degree of like maybe the ball's a little different.
Here comes the baseball.
Yeah, exactly. They're gonna do it. Right. I couldn't avoid it. I mean, it's that's a thing that pulled barrels are not going as far. And by now, May has sort of evened out some of the temperature concerns that we had. So I do think that is part of what's going on. And if you think about it, the Dodgers are going heavy sinker. The Giants under Bailey were going heavy sinker. I looked at the changes in pitch types, and yes, splitters are up the most, 1 percentage point, but that's still kind of a big deal if you think about the entirety of baseball. Sinkers are up about 1 percentage point, about as much as splitters. We thought this was the year of the splitter, but it turns out it's the year of the splitter sinker thing. So if you think about, why would you do more with the sinkers? First of all, because 80% of the league is ride guys. Baseball, these hitters are getting used to ride. They're getting used to training for ride. Now you say, hey, all right, now we got turbo sinkers, we got training, we got Gratterall, we got this, we got that. You got Walker Buehler throwing a sinker, like we got Tyler Glasnow throwing a sinker. So that's part. And then the other part of it is if you aren't going to get hit as hard when they lift the ball, like if the ball isn't going to go as far when you lift the ball, then the reason that sinkers are kind of bad is that people can lift them, and when they do lift them, it's a homer, right? So if it's not as much a guaranteed homer, then ground balls are superior, than to line drives, and so sinkers become a little bit more viable if it's not 2019 rabbit ball. So I think this all kind of ties in. But one thing that's really interesting for me is that the Braves are seeing a change in approach. And I pointed this out with Acuna, but it's actually Braves wide. So the Braves right now are seeing the most fastballs in the big leagues and the fewest sliders in the big leagues. And this is a total change from last year where they used to see a lot more sliders. And this right now is a look it's a look at who swings on sliders in the zone in 0 strike counts. So these are supposed to be like stolen strike sliders, like this didn't used to happen in baseball. And now it's a thing that the pitchers will throw sliders in these counts to get a strike. And you can see that there's a big difference in how teams approach this. So you've got the Rockies swinging at 56% of the sliders they see in 0 strike counts. So in 1-0, 0-0, 2-0, 3-0, they are ready for sliders. They swing at them and they slug well. Then you have a team like the Cardinals that is swinging at 36%, 37% of those sliders when they see them. They do well too when they do swing, but they are much more picky. So there's obviously a stratification here in terms of how people approach these sliders. And the Braves didn't pop in this year, but I would assume that there's something going on if if the league is refusing to give the Braves sliders this year and they're giving a lot more fastballs. I would assume that there used to be some sort of Braves approach. And Trevor, you had some really interesting things to say about the Rangers, who here are very aggressive on sliders. That lines up with what you remember of the Rangers when you were pitching to the Rangers, right?
Yeah. Yeah, almost top to bottom. And I went and looked, and their lineup's a lot different this year. So this was last year. Like Mitch Garver was in this group of taking sliders away, down and away. Like he was big on trying to do that, especially late. But Simeon's the number one guy. So there was a distinct difference on what they were hitting the hardest, like in even counts, 1-1 specifically, like mid counts, 2-1, like in hitter. Those are kind of I call them like transition counts. They're not necessarily huge advantage. 2-1 kind of is, but like
it's not.
You think about it that way, like this, we're either going to where I'm in control here with 2 strikes, or
it's not 3-0 or 0-2.
Not 3-0 or
very
swing. It's a swing count kind of.
Yeah.
And in those counts, they would cover fastballs and changeups really well, and then late they wouldn't cover fastballs and changeups well at all, and they would cover sliders. So they were like, this is what everyone in the league is doing. These are the patterns the most common, and we're going to be really good at hitting. We have also the guys with the swings to take care of this as well. Simeon's been good on sliders for a long time.
So they would kind of sit slider and 2 strike counts and stuff.
Yeah, they would take away the slider because everyone's relievers was just slider. They go throw your breaking ball. Now I think what's happening now, the biggest change, and you mentioned the splitter increase and the sinker increase, and I got to be clear here. A lot of these sinkers are seam shifted, and it's guys who are natural supinators. They're always on the outside of the ball, and they have never been able to figure out how to like manipulate the ball to sink it by pronating. Now we have a way to do it. We can design the pitch. Kyle Bradish throws one now, and it's disgusting. I saw it the other day on accident. I was like, there's no way he's seam shifting. And then it showed a slow-mo one. I was like, oh my God, that thing is perfect. Seam shifted sinkers look like, if you're to a hitter immediately, it looks like a cutter a little bit. It looks like you're going to yank it, and it goes the other way. Splitters are starting to look, the same guys are throwing splitters, so they're getting the same thing. It's starting to spin. They're naturally thinking a spin's going to go away from a righty on righty, and then it goes down and in, the opposite. And so that's the adjustment that's happening.
And they can come out of the same tunnel with the same sort of arm action, especially
hand position.
Yeah. Like if you look at a sinker and a sweeper grip, they look very similar.
Yeah, it's slightly changed.
Yeah. So like, that's going to spin somewhat similarly coming out, but the point is you got to get the laces to gather in one place, and you see that
air buffer. You're creating a little bowl of air to keep it going the way you want it to go. So these guys are adding that stuff. And so that approach, that slider takeaway approach, it's not a slider. Like it's just, they're not getting that slider the same way, but it kind of looks like it could be. And now that's the adjustment happening to hitters right now. And I think that has a lot to do with why those pitches are performing well, because it's become the meta, and hitters are now adjusting to it like they did to sliders before. So now the best team hitting sinkers and splitters this year is probably going to be the one there at the end of the year, because that is what they've noticed. There was a trend that was being adjusted to by hitters. Pitchers have adjusted, and now hitters are now in their adjustment period to it.
Do you think that counter adjustment, does that play out quickly over the course of the summer months in many instances, or does it actually take until maybe the off season for guys to get back in and kind of figure out how they're going to go back at it?
Off season for most. There's going to be guys who pick it up well, or this was something they hit before. They were struggling with sliders, and now they're back, and their natural inclination is a little bit better. They hit along their body line a little bit more. Julio Rodriguez is a great example of this. Like, he loves that ball along his body line, and he's getting a lot of pitches in there now. But it's going in off the plate, and he's not necessarily the best at not chasing. And so they got him. They kept getting him like off the barrel, and he's just getting himself out. And he's getting a little bit better at hitting the ones over the plate and letting the other ones go. That is adjustments he had to make. But like, it's weird. They're playing to his strength, but they're taking advantage. He's like excited that he's not getting so many breaking balls. He's still getting a lot of breaking balls, but like they're going in on him more. And he's had to adjust in a weird way. He's like, because he was so used to trying to take that other thing away. And he's young, he's 23. So it is very interesting that happens. It does take a whole year. I think that hitters adjust slower than pitchers do. Because pitchers are engaging
they're choosing the action. They're deciding the action. They could wake up. They could wake up one start and be like, today is all curveballs. You know,
yeah, I'm throwing this pitch. Yeah. I did that with that changeup. Like I said, I changed my seam shift to my changeup on accident. Did it in the middle of an outing. I can do that. Hitters aren't like, I'm just gonna like flatten my swing out in my third at bat. Like,
some I think have that ability, but very
like Mookie or something. But yeah,
those guys are special. There's only a handful, right?
Well, here's some results based analysis that kind of fits what you were saying about Texas. Last year, Texas was the best in the big leagues at hitting sliders. So you were right; they kind of took that away. And they weren't the best in the big leagues at hitting fastballs. Now, Atlanta was second best in hitting sliders and the best at hitting fastballs. But I think to some extent, they did what Olson would admit to me that he does, which is that you look for fastball high. Everyone's throwing high riding four-seamers. They love it. They throw it high in the zone. You look for the high fastball, and you have a swing for the high fastball where you kind of target the top half of the ball, you know, so that you actually hit it flush. A little bit of a different swing there. And if you can crush that, then some of the value you have on sliders is just taking them because they're going out of the zone. So you get some value on taking the sliders. And if it's a slider in the zone, either it's hanging or you're ready for it, you anticipate it. And so you anticipate maybe sliders in 2-strike counts. The way that the league has reacted to this year is to say, oh, okay, you guys kill sliders. We get it. We're just going to throw you a lot of fastballs. And we're going to throw you fastballs high in the zone. We're going to throw you fastballs low in the zone. We're going to throw you in and out. And so you can't sit in any one location. And the way this shows up for Olson is on the left, you're looking at cutters. And he used to get cutters kind of in on the hands-ish, middle-ish. That's like, you know, that's the normal thing. You throw cutters to a lefty. You throw it. You kind of trying to throw it there. Now he's getting cutters even away, but all at the very top of the zone. He's getting very high cutters. Now look at the sliders. He used to get sliders back foot down, you know, where people throw sliders. Now he's getting sliders in the middle of the zone and even higher. He's getting high sliders. In fact, he's getting sliders where he used to get cutters. So wait, you're telling me he's getting sliders where he used to get cutters, and he's getting cutters where he used to get four seams, and now he's getting four seams low? They're just saying, like, whatever you were sitting before, we're going to give you the other thing. You know, we're going to throw everything sort of middle high, and you're going to get middle high sliders, you're going to get middle high cutters. So anytime you think, oh, it's high, I know what kind of swing to put on it, you're wrong. And that's what they're doing to Olson right now. And so if he's looking location, now he has to do something different. He has to either look speed a little bit more, or he has to maybe anticipate count by count differently. He can't just be like high, let it fly, low, let it go. He can't kind of use that rubric anymore.
It's good. It's good to take away situations where you become predictable, though.
Yeah.
Like if you can basically get out of the pattern that hitters have found in your approach, either as a team or even just as an individual pitcher, if you snap out of that, they're back to square one. Like they have to relearn how they're being pitched. And like Trevor said, that doesn't happen quickly in a lot of cases.
Yeah. The thing about Olson, though, and so for Braves fans out there, I would be a little bit optimistic because that adjustment, like to where stuff's down a little bit more, his natural swing goes there well. So him picking that back up will be faster than the adjustment he made to go up and away. The up and away is just a hole generally. Like when I remember pitching to him like an 18 and 19, up and away forcing fastballs. He's a long swing. He's a very long levered guy.
Up and away is not a great place for most people.
Usually it's not, it's a really long, big bat and a long swing. So like you look at it, you're like, I don't feel comfortable going up there. But like it would just be above. He would just be under it. Right at the end for whatever reason. It would the barrel of the bat would drip, and he couldn't go completely flat. And he struggled with it, and so we peppered him. And he didn't necessarily close that hole, but a bigger hole opened when he's trying to adjust to that, and that was with the cutters up and in. So I remember distinctly. In 2022 and with the Mets, we were like cutters up and in. Olson, just that's all everyone's throwing.
So he's kind of they kind of open up the old book on him.
Yeah, so they're like, we're gonna go cutters up and in. We struggled with it. We didn't throw him a lot of strikes like he was just taking. And that's just like the way it worked, and he got a lot more walks because of that. But then he adjusted last year to hit it, so he's hitting those mistakes. But now that hole is opened up a little bit up and away. And not only that, they're not fastballs. Like you said, they're moving back over the plate, which is weird. He's like, this has never happened. But as those mistakes get made down and in again, he's going to drop the head and become a lefty and hit it again. Now, the thing
theoretically, like what you're saying is if it's the old book, he's worked on the old book before. Like this,
he's worked on the old book.
The older you get in the game, the more you're like, they're 2022ing me, they're 2021ing me or whatever, so you can be like, all right, I got to get back to that.
Yeah, so he's probably going to do that. That's to some extent, that's what I would guess.
I have a theory about up and away. Nicholas, I feel like there's not a single person who is good at it. Best chances are guys with short and sweet swings they can control.
This is good at
barrel control,
having like 2 or 3 different swings and like adjusting a lot.
Yeah, and I think the player, I should look into it real quick. I didn't think of it before the show, but Bo Bichette seems like the kind of hitter that would be able to hit up and away. But he's got that funky. I remember reading about it years ago. I talked about
he
it on
would
the show.
Take it the opposite way.
It's the tennis swing. He was a good tennis player before he became a pro ball player. That was part of what he did too. He played a lot of tennis, and he's got this different, unique approach. And I think you'd have a handful of guys that have certain approaches where they could do it, but yeah, I don't think it's the natural way you would learn to hit, because you're trying to pull barrels, and that's not a pitch you're going to pull as a barrel.
Donaldson could hit up and away too, but he's very similar to Bichette. He had a swing that was built that way. Not a lot of guys do, but the Blue Jays taught that for a couple of years. When they had Gurriel and him and Teoscar Hernandez and Vladimir. Vlad hit up a little bit better with those guys, and they just took high heaters away. That's what they tried to do, especially when I came in. They were just like, we're gonna try to block his heater because he's gonna throw it up there all the time. And they did one outing, and I was like, oh, they're very clearly taking that pitch away. And I had to make an adjustment, but that was their lineup all the way through. Now, if you go look at all those guys individually, they don't do that as much because they're not together. And they do it. They still are pretty okay at it, but like it's not like their big thing anymore.
But also the league is like, okay, if you're gonna take away the high heater, I'm gonna throw you some low heaters because you're gonna think those are sliders, and you're gonna
freezers. Yeah,
you're gonna be like late behind, or you're gonna freeze on them. Yeah. So
that's the chess bitching.
I do think this. I think there is something maybe innate about swing shape. There are certain, Pedro talks about this. When you see a guy step to the plate, he takes a practice swing. That's his swing. That's what he wants. When you see Alonso doing that, little, quick,
put it right there.
Yeah, he's telling you, I want it right there.
There?
Wilmer Flores, high ball hitter. His practice swing is high in the zone.
Yep.
And so, I do think that hitters have a natural shape. Now, the elite hitters figure out a coping mechanism for the stuff that other people are throwing at them. And one thing I was thinking about, Joey Votto and I talked for years about inside pitches, because he had this swing that could take the low and away pitch and take you out to center oppo, right? So he had this perfect swing for away, and he was always trying to figure out what to do in, because everyone's trying to pitch him in, and he had to do something about it. And so he would tell me once, you just gotta burn him a couple times. You gotta turn and burn, and you gotta maybe just anticipate and hit a couple homers to the pull side, and then they won't go in there, But that didn't work. That worked for a little bit, and then it stopped working. Then he said, okay, well, right now what I'm trying to do is just go so inside it that I take the inside pitch over the shortstop's head. There's just like a little, like just a crazy little slice swing that I'm just gonna just be me, but even more me inside. Just really and like get it like this crazy spin on it. So he was always trying stuff, and he won an MVP. Like, he was a great hitter. So at his best, you could say, here's a guy who has different swings and different approaches and different ways to combat the pitcher. But in the end, you kind of go back to who you are. Like, that's something that works at your best. So when Matt Olson was at his best, he was a guy who could cover high, cover low. He had the low swing for the low stuff. He had figured out the high swing. You never know what part of aging has to do with this. I do think he's still in his peak, so he'll figure it out. But I do think that people have kind of an innate swing, and then they have coping mechanisms for stuff outside of that. And over time, you come into the league, you have your innate swing, then you build these coping mechanisms, and then the coping mechanisms are not your strengths. And so as you start to go back out of the league, all you can do is that thing that you used to be able to do. So at the very end for Olson, at the very end for Olson, he won't be able to maybe handle high heat, and he'll just be jacking anything low, and you'll just be that's the old Olson, and he'll hit 220, and he'll hit 35 homers, and he'll kind of go back to where he was when he came into the league. But I still think he's in his peak, and he has these coping mechanisms. But and you'll see this with modeling, and I think hopefully at Pitching Plus we're working on some cool stuff about modeling the batter pitcher interaction, and I think that to some level, just a knowledge of the hitter's swing shape, you can get as a pitcher, you can get some strategies in your head, and some of that is what Pedro said. Just watch them, they walk up to the plate. Where they like it, don't give it to them there, or give it to them there when they're not expecting it.
Yeah, let's start there, and that's how you learn for sure.
Yeah.
A quick bow on the other Atlanta hitters. Sounds like there's a lot of confidence here in Olson getting right. Albies has been fine from like a general getting on base, hitting for average perspective, not striking out, but only 3 homers in 46 games. Jared Kelenic, year 1 with Atlanta, hasn't been a completely different player than he was in Seattle. Michael Harris really hasn't gotten going yet. Talked about Riley and the injuries. Is there anybody in that group that you've looked at and said, I'm not sure they're going to get right this season? They may need more time to figure something out. I mean, Marcell Ozuna has been carrying their offense in a lot of ways. He's been fantastic, and Travis d'Arnaud ran really hot while Sean Murphy was down. But of those other guys that need to step up, who are you worried about, if anyone?
I don't know if Kelenic's ever going to be like a complete cover the whole zone type of guy. He just struggles up, and he's very aggressive, and he's never hit up great, and he struggles on breaking balls generally. But even though this year he struggled with fastballs up as well, all of his damage is on right on left, like the classic changeup. It was glaring last year. He started hot and everyone throwing him changeup for some reason, and then they stopped and he kind of cooled down. And so I haven't seen that ability to do that. But then again, like, he could just be, a guy who covers the bottom of the zone really well, runs well, hits the ball hard, and plays good defense, and that's enough. But I don't know. But in terms of like Ozzy's going to hit more homers. I don't know if he's going to end with 30, but he's going to probably end up with 20 plus. And he's your second baseman. Like, he walks, he gets on base, and he's still not swinging and missing at the fast. He's not getting punched out a lot at the top of the zone. He is early. He's still him. It's one of those things like, could he easily have 7 homers? And now probably. I bet you a few balls have those 3 feet that aren't going, probably has affected him a little bit. And I wouldn't be surprised if he goes on a little bit of a tear. And like the same thing, Murphy's been hurt. We'll see what he does. That guy can hit. We all know he can hit. So he just needs some at bats. Same thing with Riley. Like, some of these guys are just like, let's check back in and 30 games, and I wouldn't be surprised if most of them have, or at least trending towards normal them. There's no reason to think that they won't.
Riley's a really interesting hitter for me because the first time I ever talked to him was at the Arizona Fall League All-Star game, and he admitted that when he struggled, he found himself in between fastballs and sliders in terms of timing. And I think that you can see that in the history of his career, which is one way that you can see it is he's demolished sliders for his career. He had a positive pitch type value for them. And in 2022, he just really destroyed sliders while being negative against fastballs. And so what you can see is in some years he's destroys fastballs, and some years he destroys sliders. And so he's kind of in between sometimes still as a major leaguer. And the other thing that I think of is when I was talking to Alex Bregman and I noticed that his pull rate was down, he said that pull rate is like a good approximation of a contact point. If you think about it, the ball, if you get the ball out in front more, you pull it more. And so if you look at a player's history and you see a certain pull rate and then you see a change in that pull rate, I think what you're seeing is they're struggling to find that right contact point. They're looking for that right contact point. Now you put those two things for Austin Riley together and you say, oh, here's a guy that struggles to sometimes when he does get that contact point right, he's boom. He's the other way on heaters and he's pulling sliders for homers and he's got that all figured out. So to another way of saying that is timing. Timing is the same thing as contact point. And so if you asked Riley what was wrong right now, he might say timing because his pull rate is down. 179 plate appearances, like by the statisticals, numbers and everything, like supposedly his pull rate is stabilized and this is what his pull rate is going to be the rest of the way. But that's not actually how it works in reality. He could change his pull rate going forward. He can change his timing. He can change his contact point. It's just going to take some time. He's got to get back from this injury, get back in the box and figure it out. But the good news is he's figured out before and he goes on blinding hot streaks. I mean, this is a guy that in that 2022 season, I think was, he was part of that. And so I just expect that he's a guy who's like tinkering with that contact point. Once he gets it right, bam.
Yeah. Seems like as long as he's healthy, Austin Riley is going to be just fine.
I agree with the Kelenic thing. I'm not sure he's a regular. I think it's more, he's just going to be, they're happy they have him right now because, Acuna goes down and they need outfielders, but they may acquire outfielders that push him back to being a fourth outfielder.
I think the part of Kelenic's career that fits into the next part of our conversation is that he's getting a brief look against lefties because of Acuna's injury. Since Acuna got hurt, they faced two left-handed starters. Kelenic actually started against both of them. This could be his last chance to establish himself as an everyday outfielder instead of a big side platoon guy. And eventually, if he doesn't start closing up holes, big side platoon guy becomes fourth outfielder. Like that's the next rung down. How long that lasts? Yeah, it's between now and the time they have another outfielder they can play. We know Alex Anthopoulos makes moves. He's aggressive. He's going to. I think
they already signed out there a veteran on a minor league deal. I forget who it was.
Yeah, I'm blanking at the moment, but
Jesse Chavez. No, it's not. He's still in the pen.
They always get Jesse Chavez.
Maybe they could bring David Fletcher up as like a fifth outfielder, also throwing knuckleballs out of the pen. I don't know.
But yeah, he's playing like the way I say he's playing for his life right now in baseball. Jared Kelenic is, and it's got to be a exhilarating and exciting feeling to have the opportunity. I think any player would say, I want the opportunity. Give me the ball. Give me the chance. Producer Brian says Ramon Laureano. That's it. Ramon Laureano signed there. But you can see those transactions. You know that Alex Anthopoulos makes moves. You can see your own numbers. You know what your numbers look like. You look at the board and you see your numbers when you're at the plate. You know how it feels. You know what's going on. And you can, like I'm sure every player, I don't need to speak for Trevor on this, but I'm sure every player like knows what the roster looks like, know what their kind of place on the roster is, like knows how close they are to being out of the starting lineup or in AAA or whatever. And so as you play along that in your head, like it just increases, it ratchets up the pressure that you put on yourself to succeed anyway, in any given day. And it just can't feel good. Like we had a list of players that we were looking at. I think I texted you some of them, but let me see what they are. There's I think the reason that we thought of this originally was Chaz McCormick, who can see that the Astros have Jose Abreu and John Singleton and Jake Myers, and can do the math in his head and can see that he's not in the lineup every day and knows that he's hitting whatever, and he must feel like I've got a week here and it's either going to be me losing my job or Singleton going down, or like there's a fulcrum happening here. There's something that's a pivotal point that's happening in my career, and I can either prove that I'm an everyday starter in 2 weeks or I'm out. Some other names that occur to me: Seth Brown is sort of up and down with the A's right now, in between roles. Ty France is seeing that Luke Raley is plays a lot of the same positions, and so he's got to fight off Luke Raley. Jake Bowers, was hot for a little bit. Now he's kind of the tank a little bit. Tyler Black is waiting in AAA. Jared Triolo was the starter at second. I mean, some of these guys are older. Kevin Kiermaier is fighting to prove that he can still be a regular and not sort of a guy who's going to be on different teams, every couple of months, or, a guy that they pick up when they need, like, the Braves. The Braves going to trade for Kevin Kiermaier to be the backup center fielder, or can he prove that he's actually an everyday starter? That's a little different than maybe Baty and Triolo, who are proving that they belong on the younger side, but they still all have that same feeling. And I'm sure you've had this, Trevor May, where you had it first when you were a starter and you're trying to prove you were a starter. And, that was kind of up and down. And then you had to prove, even as a reliever that you had to stick. And then near the end of the career that you're still a guy that's worth a contract, major league contract. So, like, what was that feeling like when you were in it? It couldn't have felt good.
You're right. It sucks a lot. Uncertainty is no one likes that. And opportunity is really the name of the game in all jobs, but it is so important in the major leagues. Like a big conversation right around, like a great example is Michael Busch with the Cubs. Mm-hmm. He wasn't going to get an opportunity with the Dodgers. He wasn't going to. He's very clearly a big leaguer, but he just wasn't given an opportunity. The A's got Ryan Noda, same thing. So it's like these guys got their opportunities. My favorite example is actually Mark Canha being a Rule 5 guy, and then finally, being on a team where they give Rule 5 guys a full year, and he proved that he's a big leaguer, and now he's, being.
And everyone was like, "Will he hit enough to be a first baseman?" And then the A's were like, "Well, he's our center fielder."
Yeah, he can play center, guys. He gets to the balls he can get to is one thing. That's what we always said about Mark. He gets to the ones that he physically could get to. Yeah. It's all about timing at the end of the day. I got called up. I had an 8 through 10 starts in my rookie year, but we were terrible. And they were just like, "You're going to go suck, and we're going to let you." And that is massive for guys' development. But then a guy like Chaz McCormick, he's on a team that is trying to go to its 8th straight ALCS, and they are 9 games under 500 and scuffling. He's not going to be given the grace period that he had before, because they have to win now. And that's how things change, and it changes quickly. It's just thinking about, oh no, like I might be on the chopping block. My example actually is in 2015, Ervin Santana was coming off his 80-game suspension. And at that time, I was a starting pitcher, and I was throwing pretty well. I just had like a 4 at that time, which was great in 2015. For me anyway, especially after the year before, like I just mentioned. So I feel like I'm getting my feet under me and throwing pretty well recently. But Tommy Malone was up. He was absolutely dominant. Like he was shoving, like hadn't given him a run in 3 starts or something. And we had Mike Pelfrey, who was bouncing back from his Tommy John and having his best year in a long time. And one guy could not put Tommy Malone in the pen. And Mike Pelfrey was on a contract, and I was a sophomore, technically still rookie. So I'm like, I mean, if it comes down to it, whatever. So we go on a road trip. I know it's happening at the end of this road trip. It's the one we go play the NL teams, so I have to hit. So add that in. And my first outing, I go out against the Brewers, and I give up 6 1/3 of an inning and get pulled in the first.
And
so
you're like, that's it.
It's me. But I knew going in, and it literally happened to me that day where I didn't know. I was like, well,
that might have changed your life. Like you have a starter's arsenal, and to some extent, like you could have been a starter.
I probably could have. I mean, I got like 2 more chances after this, and it didn't work out those times. The universe told me eventually. I think I made the right decision, but I think in another world I could have. I think that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, at the major league level, you got one more start after that.
Yeah. So I throw one more start. I throw one more start after that. Throw well, and what happens? They move me to the pen. So they came in. They're like, "Will you throw out of the pen?" I said, "Yep. Don't send me down, please don't." The quote was, "Tommy is throwing really well, so we can't put him in the pen. He throws 86, right?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "And Mike Pelfrey takes an hour to get ready. we can't put Pelf out in the pen." I was like, "You're right, you can't." I agree.
What if you're like, "But I could take longer if that helps."
But I was just like, I was just the young guy that was malleable and like willing, and I was like, "Yes, sir. Yes, captain.
Well,
whatever
I mean,
you need."
there's that like, would you rather stay in the big leagues and lose your shot? I mean, that's a big question. For some of these, it's a big question. Like, if the Mets were good and winning, and Baty was better than the backup third baseman, and they went to Baty and they said, "Would you rather be in the minor leagues, getting regular at bats and getting better, maybe, or would you rather stay up?" Like, what would you do in that situation? I guess you answered that question. You would rather stay in the big.
Always stay in the big leagues. Because those, like we're talking about the opportunities. You go down to AAA, 2 days, something happens. That guy who's got your spot is absolutely tearing the cover off the ball. Has 10 hits in 3 days. Now he's got that shine for a couple of weeks.
So that Wally Pip or whatever, the what is it? The guy
you don't
who
get the
over?
opportunity. It's over, and it's gone. It just kind of they change their mind, and it's just the nature of the game. You want to make sure that you are in front of them, and like they have to make a decision. You are in the consciousness. That's one thing that's scary about like having Tommy John. You want to be rehabbing at the stadium because you don't want to the front office to forget you're on the team.
that sounds bad, but
real.
You know, it's actually relevant to me in my life. That one thing that is tough about writing and being remote like this is like we see each other, and so we have good rapport and we know each other. But like the people I work with, I see them once a year. Like my editors and like those people, I see them once a year at the winter meetings, and that's bizarre. And there is like I felt more tight with the organization when we were a San Francisco based company, that I could go into the office and see them sometimes. And we had happy hours, and, you know, it's like, I think there's a word for it. I guess it's proximity bias. It's like, you see, you're more biased towards the people you see more often, the people you see every day.
100%. And that's real too. That's very, very real.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, for all these guys, it's like, you know, just play well enough to stay on the roster. Jake Bauers is like, I'm going to make sure I don't muff any grounders, so they still think I'm the best defensive option at first base, and, you know, try to hit a homer here. But if your sphincter is that tight, like you just can't, like, how do you come to the ballpark and like and perform? Like it's like just another level. And I feel like on some level, the A's are like, we're the team of opportunity. We're going to take all these guys who may have just been too tight in these situations. We'd love to take your Baty. We'd love to take your Triolo. We'll just take these guys off the waiver wire. Anytime you think they're done with a guy, we'll give them a month or two where, you know, it's Oakland and nobody's at the games. And, you know, we just
give us Toro, give us Andujar. That's a great, they do that. They also have Mason Miller intentionally walk people. That's neither here nor there.
Did you see his splinker though?
That is a bad tactic.
Like, he sailed one, and they're like 97. That's not his fastball. I'm like, nope, he's throwing a splitter.
Yeah, he doesn't command it.
No, he does. You can tell he throws it. All right, back to slider. That was fun to try.
Enough of that.
Yeah. I got a few questions here coming in from the live hive. We'll get to those in just a minute. I think the last group of player that sort of fits into this conversation are the out of options guys, because that's where it feels like your future is probably even more dire. Like going down sucks. Being DFA'd has to be worse by far, because then you have no idea what's next. You're in
but a DFA
purgatory.
At least. You know, I was talking to Spencer Turnbull about, you know, the whole way that things went down in Detroit, and he, at some point, it came to like a sort of a battle between them where, you know, he felt like they'd misdiagnosed his neck injury and all this stuff. And at the end, he was kind of like, I'll never pitch for you, is what he told them. Like he wanted the DFA because then he could go somewhere. You know, he like going back down in an organization that you know doesn't value you.
Yeah,
That's
you
got
would
to be
rather
the
be
worst.
put back in the pool.
You'd
Put back in
rather
the
rather just be like, okay, maybe Oakland, here we come. You know,
Yeah.
The early free agency. I was thinking about it less from the perspective of someone like Joe Adele, who's out of options and it's done the up and down enough times with the Angels where when they finally get to a point where they're like, okay, it's not going to work. You're right. He gets early free agency, essentially, if he gets DFA'd and goes unclaimed. He might go claimed. I was thinking about like the Mitch White example. There's guys every year, there's a handful of players. They end up being the ultimate fringe players. Usually it's a reliever and they bounce around to 3 or 4 different teams because they're the guy that every GM, they think
and
you can be
imagine they
snuck
have
through
wives.
waivers
Some
and
of
you
them have
can't.
wives and children. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
A lot of them do, actually. It's
Yeah.
always a guy who's been around for a little bit too.
Yeah.
Right. It's just that sweet spot of like late 20s, usually for age, kind of good stuff, not enough
Luke
track
Weaver last year
record.
did it.
Yeah.
Brutal. And sometimes guys come out of it and they're fine. They end up having a spot and it clicks. But I wondered if there should be similar to the limit on the number of times in a season you can go up and down now. If we need a limit on the number of times you can be DFA'd, or if after the third team in a season DFAs you, you get straight up free agency and you get to choose the next place you go instead of getting scooped off waivers by a team that's inevitably going to do the same thing to you that the last couple teams just did.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, we have a limit on options, and part of that is life and you know, consideration for family and just what it means to option a guy like 8 times in a year. What the Rays were doing. Oh my God, they were just optioning guys left and right. So yeah, why not a limit on DFAs? That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's bad enough because it takes so long to get to free agency anyway. So if you're going to have players that get stuck in that spot, let's try and eliminate that.
Although it might limit some of the interest in you because then the next person who's getting you doesn't they don't have the opportunity of maybe getting you for 3 years or whatever.
Yeah, that is the carrot.
Kind of a lose-lose for the whole player.
Yeah, right.
Doesn't seem
we're aware.
great.
We'd love to just, I don't know, be drafted and then play for that team forever. That'd be great. But unfortunately, that may never happen again. Actually, there's a chance that may never happen again.
And from money reasons, like that kills all your leverage. If that's the whole way they did it, and they didn't make any money. So.
A few questions here. This one's from MJ Logan 42. Who is your favorite MLB one-hit wonder? We're not talking Jason Stark, weird and wild, someone who got to the big leagues, had a cup of coffee, got one hit, and then never got a hit again. But someone that came up, was really productive. I think Dominic Brown was the example that
he had
MJ
a
Logan threw.
30-30 projection one year. That was amazing.
I saw Dominic Brown in the fall league back when everybody thought Dominic Brown was going to be a long-term star in the big leagues. And he did have one really nice big league season. 2013, he popped 27 homers, stole 8 bases, 18% K rate. He was 23% better than league average. But nothing after that clicked quite the same way. So do you have a favorite going back, either someone that maybe won you a league, a teammate, someone you've watched, someone you covered that actually kind of fits that description?
That's interesting. It's funny. I was there for the Dom Brown years too. I remember the Dom Brown mania there in Philly. Good dude, Dom. I liked him a lot. I don't know. Do you have anybody? Think about this for a second.
I was thinking a little bit about like JD Drew. It doesn't fit because he had a career, but he had that one year where he hit 305 with 31 homers and 12 stolen bases, and like that was another level for him.
I got one. It's a total homer call, but Bill Hall is my favorite.
Oh, that's such a good one. That's a much
Bill Hall,
one.
35 homers in 2006. That was the year I graduated college. And the day I actually walked across the stage happened to be Mother's Day that year. We went home, just hanging out with family. Bill Hall hits a walk-off with the pink bat with his mom in the stands on that
That's
day.
Right. That's in baseball lore. I mean, that's people just talk about every time there's a pink bat, and I'm sure they talk about it in Milwaukee every time there's a Mother's Day.
Every Mother's Day game they play, they show that highlight, and they even gave away Bill Hall bobbleheads the following season and snuck in some with pink bats, which I happened to get, which is pretty cool. So that's like my favorite random ballpark collectible. So I think Bill Hall is my favorite one-hit wonder. That was just a ridiculous 2000.
It takes, you know what it takes? It takes a homer. It takes thinking of your team, because it's the type of situation where it has to be a team you followed, and usually when you were younger. I've got one, Marcus Giles.
Marcus Giles. Haven't heard that name in a while.
I mean, Ben Giles was like, they both had huge quads, and like Ben Giles had like a career, and Marcus Giles in 2003 had 21 homers, 14 stolen bases, and a 316 average, and he wasn't bad. I don't even. There's got to be some more story to why he didn't get more chances or what was going on there. But I think there must be an injury component. It fell off, and he didn't play that much, and maybe he hurt his shoulder or something. But that was a bright, shining year for us with Marcus Giles at second base, and I just remember the quads.
Oh man,
I got a crazy
Live
one then.
lighting up. What do you got, Trevor?
All right, you're right. I was like, the Mariners, this is like perfect for them. They have these guys all the time, and this is a guy you may never even have heard of. And he only had 160 ABs, but they were 160 good ABs, and then I think he got hurt, and then we just never saw him again. Bucky Jacobson.
Whoa,
You know that name?
Whoa,
2004. Yeah, deep cut here. 160 ABs. He hit 9 homers, 44 hits. He hit 275 with an 835 OPS for 117 OPS plus. Like he was the next big thing. He was the big first baseman. He was going to be the big power guy, and then he literally disappeared off the face of the planet. I think he still lives here. But Bucky Jacobson, he was a big deal. I think I was 14, so like I was very dialed in on the next group of Mariners, and then after the Bucky year, it was not nice until about 2023.
Oh man, yeah, he looked like I'm just looking at his stats. Like he had some power, and I guess he struck
Like
out a little bit much.
Dude,
but
he looked like a lumberjack, so he's like really fun to watch, like Evan Gaddis.
yeah. What the heck happened? Why didn't he get a shot in 2005? I mean, like nothing. Very strange.
Think he tore like a hip labrum or something. Ended his year, and then just see ya.
Yeah, he ended up back AAA for a little bit in 05.
How about Death to Flying Things? You remember him?
Death to Flying Things?
Franklin Gutierrez.
Oh yeah, I remember Goody. I hit him in the middle of the back once.
He had 2 full seasons, kind of like a 2020 talent with great defense, and then I guess
IBS IBS took him down for 2 years. Remember that? He had like really bad stomach problems for literally 2 years and could not play, and he had to like ended up retiring him.
And then when he came back, he probably wasn't the same defender, and so there was more pressure on his bat, which was always a little bit behind.
One of the submissions that came in was Aristides Aquino, just from a couple of years ago. Remember how hot he was?
Insanity right there.
Aquino in Cincinnati.
Oh yeah, dude!
Like 20 games.
Started his career. He hit so many homers.
He hit 19 in 56 games, but I think it was like 10 in 13 games at one point. It was an insane run.
Yeah, that guy. I remember that.
Just gone. 1.5 WAR in 56 games, parts of 3 seasons since then, and gone. Oof.
Yeah, he could not hit a fastball up at all. It was bad there at the end.
We got Daniel from the Live Hive saying Brian LaHare. I think he was an all-star 1 year for a rebuilding Cubs team.
But LaHare, there is something to think about with LaHare, which is that he was old by the time he got his chance.
Yeah, and I think it's players like that when we get to like a Joey Meneses for a more recent example of who gets that late opportunity. I'm always so skeptical. Frank Schwindel, like those guys that 28, 29, even 30 sometimes when they get their first big league run. It's such a fun story. And as someone who tries to like project performance, you're kind of sitting there like, this can't last. This is almost impossible to last more than a partial season. And when it goes on for
Ryan
a year,
Ludwig is the patron saint of these guys. And in fact, Ryan Ludwig, is probably a pretty good outcome for having that late of a debut. I mean, he was 29 when he first played, even over 300 plate appearances. At 30, at 37 homers for St. Louis in 2008, and then he never really got to 600 plate appearances again. But he did play another 4 years and hit another 100 or so homers, pretty regularly. So Ludwig is like a pretty good outcome for that. But that is a sort of a class of player for sure.
Oh, man.
Coughlin.
Benjamin, Chris Coughlin was just on this. Chris Coughlin was just on the bottom there. Benjamin Weber, Carroll next. Oh, he just went to the bad place.
No,
don't put that on Corbin Carroll. That's brutal. Come on, that's not what's happening right now. That can't be.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, if it does happen for Carroll, he's just in a different kind of place. Like he's would be like a top prospect that fizzled out. Like that's not what we're talking about. We're kind of talking about kind of out of nowhere, was good for a certain amount of time and then gone.
Yeah, that guy got drafted and then played 185 games. And then just is supposed to be like, 3 months off season, I'm good. My legs are fine. Like, just give him a second. He'll be all right.
How about this one? James Outman. THP Knob. That might be a one that we just saw last year where I thought this year was going to be better for Outman. He's at AAA right now. Maybe he gets another shot. He's actually doing well at AAA, still striking out a lot. But a 23 homer, 16 steal season a year ago for the Dodgers, he's in that position where it's just tough to get back because the roster's so good and they'll go out and get what they need at the trade deadline. So if he gets another shot, James Outman probably gets a month, 6 weeks at most to really secure his longer-term future as a Dodger before he ends up in that Michael Busch bin that you described earlier where he's just stuck without a chance.
Yeah. Maybe. I have one big one I think is great to throw in before we get out. And I can't remember the name. You might be able to remember the name off the top of my head. White Sox, DH, Latin guy he started the season with like 9 straight hits. Who am I?
You mean Mercedes?
Mercedes. Yes.
Yeah.
Great example. 1 month. See ya.
Oh my gosh. That one is one's a complicated one because there's lots of different opinions about his work ethic and whether or not he could catch and all this stuff. Something really interesting about his career to have 346 plate appearances in her career and be league average in those 346 plate appearances and not really get a chance that was more than that year where he got 262 plate appearances. Like, it's kind of strange. But I saw him here locally. He got picked up by the Giants, and I guess it's the sort of thing where like he didn't have a defensive position, and so you need to be better than league average. Like, you kind of need to be like 10% better than league average to be a DH, and they weren't sure he was going to be that. So,
yeah, great question in the live hive. Who is that giant Brewers first baseman? Who's that huge Brewers slugger that played first base? I don't know. All of them? I mean,
everyone's like, he was more than just a Brewer, though. He's good with Mariners, too.
When people talk about huge, I think of Japhet Amador.
He was very large.
He never actually, I've been looking, he never got a big league plate appearance. That's all spring training.
Chris Carter?
Yeah. Chris Carter, yeah.
Are we talking about just Rowdy Tellez? Are we talking
all of them?
Vogelbach, like John Jaha? Like, there's we have gone to the deep end of remembrance.
You know what's funny about that too is that like it really leans into the Brewers ethos. Like, it's like Brewers, like it's like beer league softball, the name Brewers, it's like, and this is our beer league softball first baseman.
Yeah.
He's hitting a keg at first base.
Adam Dunn could have been the poster boy for the Brewers.
Yeah, really. It's sad that he wasn't.
It goes all the way back to Rob Deere, I think, as far as like that player
Rob
type.
Deere is the patron saint there.
Rob Deere.
It is time for us to go on our way out the door. Just a quick reminder, you can find us on Twitter. You can find Trevor at I am Trevor May. Find Eno at Eno Saris. Find me at Derek Van Riper. The pod is at Rates and Barrels. Jump in the Discord. A lot of good stuff happening in there. Link is in the show description. Good conversation throughout the week, so be sure to do that. You can send questions for a future episode there. You can also drop us an email, ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. Going to inbox 0 heading into the new month. So if it comes in starting tomorrow, it will be seen. If it's not, then it's going to get deleted. Sorry.
So try again.
Try again. Yep. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Monday.
I'll be at the Firestone Walker Beer Festival tomorrow. If you are down in Paso Robles, find me. I will probably wear my Wookie Jack shirt like I have to the last 4 Firestone Walker Beer Festivals. Why not? Just stay the same. And thanks for listening.
I'm so jealous.